1914, Albert Kahn's mission to create a photographic archive of life on the planet was gathering pace. From his mansion on the outskirts of Paris, Kahn was sending photographers all around the globe to record the richness and variety of human culture. In May of that year, Léon Bussy, an officer in the French colonial army, approached the archive. He had heard about Kahn's ambitious plans and was keen to become involved.
Léon Bussy, c'était un photographe amateur suffisamment doué pour avoir été reçu un prix de la Société française de photographie. Et donc l'offre de service d'un tel homme était précieuse pour Albert Kahn.
Bussy was stationed in Vietnam, the most important country in France's Far Eastern Empire. The French had been in Vietnam since the 1850s, but it had taken many years of bitter fighting to take control of the country. By the end of the century, neighbouring Laos and Cambodia had also become French protectorates. Together, the three countries were known as Indochina. It was a huge, sparsely populated territory, much of it covered in dense forests. Bussy took most of his pictures for the Kahn archive in the province of Tonkin, next to the Chinese border. Unlike most French colonials, Bussy was so fascinated with Vietnamese culture that he took the trouble to learn the local language.
L'avantage de disposer des services d'un homme qui connaît aussi bien le pays, c'est sa capacité à décrypter en quelque sorte les comportements des gens. Et au fond, c'est cette qualité d'empathie que peut manifester Bussy envers une population qu'il côtoie depuis longtemps et qu'il connaît bien.
It's not like, a big white man came round with his camera to take pictures, but he clearly enjoys sharing some moments with them, and nobody looks sort of scared of the Frenchman.
In 1914, Vietnam was a mostly rural society of some 15 million people. Rice was the central element of the local diet throughout Vietnam. Its production meant unrelenting toil in the paddy fields.
In Vietnamese society, everybody, when they become 18 years old, the village give them a pieces of land to plant the rice, to get something for you to eat. Rice is everything to Vietnamese family.
In spite of being blessed with 2 annual rice harvests, in Tonkin there was rarely enough to feed everyone. These photographs of a group of beggars were taken on the outskirts of Hanoi in 1915.
I think there's one that's really strong. I think it holds up today. The light is right. The body language is exceptional. The woman has all of her children kind of spread out on the street. I mean, it looks desperate. The people look like they're in pain. They all look like they're ready to die. It's very dramatic, and I think it's pulled off extraordinarily well.
In Vietnam, however, things weren't always what they seemed.
In those photos, I would say some of them may have been professional beggars from some villages. They are seasonal beggars, not homeless. They have a house. So when they don't have to do the work in the paddy fields, they go out to big cities, begging, collecting money, and some visiting friends.
Though Vietnam was a poor country, it had a rich and vibrant culture. In Tonkin, wrestling was a popular sport. These men are praying to their village gods for success in upcoming bouts. The larger villages hosted touring theatre companies, and many had their own troupes of amateur actors. These brightly dressed girls look like actors in uniform, but in fact, they're human chess pieces.
Well, you wouldn't play human chess every day, but you'd see it at the Tet Festival, the Spring Festival. A family would be very honored if their children, say young girls or young boys, are chosen to play on the human chessboard.
Culturally, Tonkin was heavily influenced by its northern neighbour China. In the past, the region had been administered by court-appointed mandarins. By the time Bussy took these pictures, the French had stripped them of much of their power. But they couldn't take away their pride or their glorious costumes.
In feudal Vietnam, normal man cannot wear any kind of robe or dress with dragon because it symbolizes power and the state authority. In this picture, this man, his coat has some dragons in green color, so he must be somebody of significant status.
Elders occupied the next rung down in the village pecking order, followed by the educated classes. This is a local scribe, the reader and writer of letters. He wears his nails long as a badge of honor. This man never goes near a paddy field. Here is a teacher. His tall chair signifies his elevated social position. And this autochrome shows a Buddhist priestess with an unusual symbol of her status.
Oui, la présence de réveil est assez bizarre, mais je crois que il représente un signe de richesse pour la pagode, parce que il y a 100 ans, le réveil était très très rare au Vietnam.
Vietnam was a deeply religious country. Imported beliefs such as Buddhism from India and Confucianism from China coexisted with local cults and the almost universal practice of ancestor worship. The dead were very much alive in the minds of Vietnamese peasants. They left food for deceased ancestors on altars inside their houses and outside their villages. On important anniversaries, they burned paper models to send presents to their relatives in the afterlife. Every July, on the day of the first full moon, ceremonies were carried out to release any poor souls who were trapped in the underworld. This priest is performing in front of a paper model of one of the 10 courts of hell. He uses his staff to symbolically smash open its gates and set the spirits free. During his time in the colony, Bussy recorded an astonishingly rich cross-section of Vietnamese life. From rich men to lepers. From the very old to the very young. Actors, factory girls, sailors, musicians. But very, very few French men and women. Occasionally in his pictures of Hanoi, there are French buildings and hoardings with Western advertising. Yet the colonists themselves appear only as tiny figures on the edge of frame, dwarfed by the landscape and lost in the background. But his pictures do show their impact on Vietnam. The French built cathedrals and opera houses and created roads and railways to open up Indochina to trade. This is the Dumer Bridge near Hanoi, constructed in 1902 by the world-famous Eiffel Company.
Le pont Dumer, c'est une énorme masse de métal, très solide d'ailleurs, et assez beau d'ailleurs, il est assez beau ce pont. Le pont Dumer, il a presque environ 2 km, c'est le plus long pont du monde à l'époque. Les Français n'ont pas payé, ce sont les paysans vietnamiens qui ont payé. C'est par le prélèvement très lourd sur le produit de l'agriculture paysanne. Les colons, les Européens, ne payent pas d'impôts.
French traders grew wealthy by exploiting Vietnam's natural resources. While many peasants went hungry, colonial businessmen turned Vietnam into one of the world's biggest exporters of rice. There was also money to be made on the domestic market. The colony's budget depended on revenues from state monopolies on salt, alcohol, and opium.
Alors il y a partout dans les villes un établissement avec le drapeau français où il y a marqué RO, Régie de l'opium.
The French encouraged the Vietnamese to smoke opium. They opened up a network of opium shops and smoking rooms. The Vietnamese were subject to exploit.
Il y a eu des fortunes qui se sont édifiées sur la vente de l'opium. En gros, l'opium fournit à peu près 20 à 23% du budget du gouvernement général.
Opium was usually the preserve of men, but one of Busy's most striking images is this study of a young woman surrounded by the paraphernalia of opium smoking. Like many Frenchmen in the colony, Busy was fascinated by the women of Indochina.
I think his pictures of women are the best work he produced. I could almost see some of these pictures ending up being in a fashion magazine today. The background is considered, the light's very soft and wonderful, and the poses often are very fresh and natural. I think a photographer today would be very proud to have taken those same pictures.
Busy even persuaded one young woman to strip off in front of camera. For propriety's sake, he shot it tastefully out of focus.
The anthropological rationale for the film is probably an interest in costume and clothes, etc. And so, sure, there is an attempt to protect the sort of sanctity of this view by shooting out of focus, by respecting this woman. Yet, at the same time, it's inevitable that there is a voyeuristic element that's overlaid within this film.
Dans le monde des Européens, il y a peu de femmes, hein, très peu de femmes. Donc, on est toujours à la recherche, l'Européen cherche aussi le contact féminin. Et il ne peut le trouver que parmi les femmes colonisées.
Busy's pictures portray Vietnam as a calm, orderly colony. But the political reality was different. As a soldier in the French army, he would have known that the French never managed to pacify Vietnam. Throughout their rule, there were small-scale insurrections. The French responded by brutally suppressing any opposition and trying to win over enough local people to overcome resistance to their presence. This photograph shows Hong Tong Fu, the French-appointed governor of Tonkin, denounced by many as a collaborator.
He worked directly with the French to conquer the North. To do something like regaining the independence, first you have to learn from them. And it's better to join them than, following some rebels in the mountainous areas without any idea how to save the nation. So he's a head figure in Vietnamese communist textbooks.